support Senator Bernie Sanders at 202-748-8921. And for all others, 202-748-8922. We are live tonight in Philadelphia, where the former vice president will be speaking to reporters at the Constitution Center. There you can see the podium is in place, the banners in the backdrop. Again, the former vice president had intended to be in Cleveland with an eye on the primary next Tuesday, March 17th in Ohio. The same for Senator Bernie Sanders, but at the request of Ohio's governor, the events had been canceled. We'll hear more from the vice president tonight. We will not hear from Senator Bernie Sanders. In terms of the schedule, some changes for the candidates as well. Tomorrow, the former vice president will be in Wilmington, and then on Thursday, he is expected to deliver a policy speech on the coronavirus. His schedule for the weekend right now is TBD, in large part of the coronavirus issue. And also with the results tonight, let's look at 3 of the states where the polls are now closed, and so far it is a sweep for the former vice president. In Michigan, you can see with 37% of the vote now in, Joe Biden at 53%, Senator Bernie Sanders at just over 40%. That is significant. Keep in mind, 4 years ago, Senator Sanders eking out a very narrow win over Hillary Clinton that essentially kept him in the race through June of 2016. A very different story. We should also point out there is a Republican primary in these states. No contest. Donald Trump is winning easily. In Missouri, another win for the former vice president, a double-digit lead, 57% for Joe Biden, 32.3% for Senator Bernie Sanders. And in Mississippi, a state that the former vice president is winning significantly. Keep in mind that if Bernie Sanders does not reach that 15% threshold, right now he is at 14.7%, he will not get the delegates. There are 36 delegates in Mississippi, so potentially with the former vice president winning easily with 81.3% of the vote, it could be all delegates, all 36 delegates for Joe Biden. Here are the states where there are caucuses and votes: in Washington, Idaho, North Dakota, Michigan, Missouri, and Mississippi. We will take you live to Philadelphia when the former vice president speaks to reporters. But first up, Joe in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, supporter of Senator Sanders. Good evening. Your thoughts about the results tonight so far?
Well, I kind of thought this was going to happen whenever he was talking about our education system and comparing it to the way Cuba was handling their education system. And whenever he let people label him socialist, I think that scared a lot of people away. And I kind of thought this was going to happen, actually.
Joe, thank you. Matt Visor of the Washington Post with this tweet: Joe Biden has now won in dominant and decisive fashion 14 of the last 18 states where winners have been declared after starting off the presidential race in a spectacular nosedive, going 0 for 3. And that's from Matt Visor of the Washington Post. Let's get to Christina from Albany, Oregon. Good evening. Supporter of Joe Biden.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead, Christina.
I just wanted to say I'm hoping Biden wins.
Thank you for the call. Let's go to Jill joining us next from Windsor, Massachusetts, a Sanders supporter. Good evening, Jill. Jill, you with us? We'll try one more time. We'll go to Mark in Davis Station, South Carolina. Good evening, Mark.
Hey, good evening. You know, I just wonder when Bernie Sanders and the rest of the Democrat Party supporting him are going to look inward to the corruption that is so clearly evident as it was in 2016, thinking that, you know, Debbie Wasserman Schultz and the rest of the Democratic primaries and how that was pretty much stolen from him for Hillary Clinton. Just frustrating because, you know, as crazy as Bernie Sanders is, he's definitely got the public support in the same way that Trump did in 2016. So I just wonder when these guys are going to start thinking about the corruption inside their own party when it's happened twice now, both 2016 and 2020. So thanks.
Mark, thank you for the call. Well, to that note, a statement earlier tonight from the Bernie Sanders campaign with the long lines and delays in the state of Michigan. The campaign issuing the following, saying, at a time when Democrats correctly attack Republicans for voter suppression, it is disappointing to see people standing in long lines for hours today waiting to vote in Michigan and around the country. People should not have to miss a day of work to exercise their right to vote. This is an outrage. Election officials must address these problems immediately and, if necessary, keep polling places open longer. We'll go to Mike joining us next from Texas, supporter of the former vice president. Good evening, Mike.
Hello, good evening.
Yeah, Mike, I'm going to ask you to turn the volume down on your set. Otherwise, we're going to hear an echo and you're not going to come through. Okay, we're going to have to move on again. If you get through, please turn the volume down. Charlie in Wisconsin, good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Good. How are you, sir?
Very well, thank you. Basically, I just wanted to say that Bernie Sanders presents a really good vision of health care and that sort of thing. And I think if Mr. Biden would also address those things regarding health care and education, I think that he would get the Bernie Sanders support.
Thank you for the call. By the way, the Biden campaign tonight, a very different event. It will be very low key. He is in Philadelphia, site of his campaign headquarters, not far from his hometown, adopted hometown of Wilmington, Delaware. That is the National Constitution Center in downtown Philadelphia. Lloyd in Albany, Oregon, supporter of Bernie Sanders. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
Yeah, I'm a little confused because what's taken place for the last couple of weeks is where Sanders was quite dominant in the lead. I mean, he was doing very well, and then all of a sudden everybody came behind Joe Biden, dropped out of the race, backed him. And I'm not quite sure I understand what's going on, because if you watch Joe Biden speak, if you watch Joe Biden at his campaign rallies, if you watch Joe Biden, there's something wrong with him. He's not mentally fit to be president, and I do not understand why the DNC would commit political suicide by collectively backing this guy right now, when on a stage standing next to Donald Trump, if you had Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders debating him, it's quite obvious Bernie Sanders is the only one with mental capacity to actually debate with Donald Trump. Joe Biden cannot. There is no way that Joe Biden can debate Donald Trump. None. Much less be president for 4 years and make decisions that have to do with not only health care, domestic policy, but foreign policy. There's something wrong with this guy, and until the DNC allows the media to find out what's been going on with this guy, they're going to find themselves in a lot of trouble coming up against Donald Trump.
Lloyd, thanks for the call. We'll go to Charlie joining us from Kennebunkport, Maine, a supporter of the former vice president. You heard what the other caller was saying. How do you respond?
Well, I totally disagree with him. I think Joe Biden is the only one out there now that can stand up against the current president. Biden has been my favorite all along. He's the only one that has the experience and the wherewithal to stand up to the current president. So we're looking for a big change in the election coming up. We're looking for a strong Democratic takeover in the Senate, and let's get back to business.
Charlie, thank you. This is from David Wasserman. He is the House editor for the Cook Political Report. He also, by the way, joined us this week for our podcast, The Weekly, looking at campaign 2020. He says the big story in Michigan, the shifting allegiance of the working class white Dems since 16. Pretty much the Upper Peninsula voting for Sanders in 16. So far, huge margins for Biden. Let's look at the results again, with now 41% of the vote in Michigan. Again, an easy win for the former vice president. Right now at 53% to 40% for Senator Bernie Sanders. Again, 6 states with primaries or caucuses today, including North Dakota. The results from Missouri, former Vice President Joe Biden at 58.2%, Senator Sanders at 33.3%. So a significant win in that state, a double-digit lead for the former vice president. And look at this from Mississippi, where Bernie Sanders now has crossed the 15% threshold, meaning that he will get at least some of the 36 delegates in Mississippi. But the former vice president with a commanding lead at over 81% of the vote in Mississippi. Keep in mind that the Sanders campaign had scrubbed plans to campaign in Jackson, Mississippi, instead putting all of his efforts with the hope to repeat what happened in 2016 when he eked out a very narrow win, but changing the race in 2016 against Hillary Clinton. 352 delegates at stake tonight, with primaries and caucuses out west in Idaho and Washington. In North Dakota, as we mentioned, Michigan, Missouri, and Mississippi. Will is joining us from Cleveland, Ohio, a supporter of Joe Biden. Good evening, Will.
Yes, how you doing, sir?
Good, thank you.
I'm a United States Navy veteran, and you know what? I believe in Biden, and I know Donald Trump ain't nothing but a big liar.
Diana is next, Vancouver, Washington. Diana, did you vote today, or did you mail in your vote, correct?
Yes, we are mail-in, and I
you're-
have mailed in my vote.
And you're also at the epicenter of the coronavirus crisis.
Yes, this is true.
So what are your thoughts tonight?
Well, I would say that at long last, both the Republicans and the Democrats have shown that they are concerned about interference in the election, because the DNC and Trump obviously are not about to let the American voters interfere with the election result.
Diana, thank you. President Trump had this tweet with an eye on Michigan saying, if you like automobiles, how can you vote for a Democrat who all want to get rid of cars as quickly as possible, especially if they are powered by gasoline? Remember also, no more than one car per family. I, on the other hand, have new plants being built all over Michigan, plus, exclamation mark. That from the president earlier today, who easily won in Michigan. His name also on the ballot in Missouri and in Mississippi. An eye on the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia. Again, the former vice president and the Sanders campaign scrubbing plans for campaign rallies, both scheduled to be in Cleveland, Ohio tonight. But at the request of the governor and other state officials, and as the coronavirus continues, they decided to cancel those campaign rallies this evening. So we will hear from the former vice president. He will speak to reporters with scheduled remarks that had been planned for 9:30 Eastern time. He is now 15 minutes behind schedule. Shub is next from Ann Arbor, Michigan, supporter of Joe Biden. Did you vote?
Hi, I actually voted for Sanders.
Well, go ahead, please.
So I thought it's really outrageous that the American people are still stuck in the past and continue to vote for Biden, even though we can see that he is just unfit to fight against Trump in this next election. I've seen him speak many a time, and I saw Bernie Sanders speak as well. Bernie Sanders has passion and has worked for the same causes, and has kept straight in like what he believes in for the past as long as he's been in politics. Sanders and the DNC and Joe Biden are really making a mess of things right now. We can't stay in the past if we want to move towards the future. I know Trump is saying things about keeping Michigan an automobile state, but we're no longer in the 1960s. So this is, as a student, I can see that we need to keep moving on. We need to create more jobs, and Joe Biden cannot and will not be able to beat Trump in these next elections. We need a president who thinks bigger, who thinks about the future, who has a better mindset than Joe Biden does. And I think Bernie Sanders is the only one who will be able to defeat Trump in this next election.
From Ann Arbor, Michigan, thanks for the call. There was a moment that's essentially gone viral earlier today when he was in Detroit meeting with workers at an auto factory, and the issue of the NRA and gun rights came up. Let's watch.
You are actively trying to limit your Second Amendment right and take away from God. You're for shit.
No, shush. Shush. I support the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment, just like right now, if you yell fire, that's not free speech. But from the very beginning, I have a shotgun, I have a 20 gauge, a 12 gauge, my son's hunt. Guess what? You're not allowed to own any weapon. I'm not taking your gun away at all. You need 100 rounds.
When you were in Veto and you said you're going to take our guns.
I did not say that. That's not. I did not say that.
Video.
It's a viral video like the other ones they're putting out that are simply a lie.
Your voice. You said that you're taking the guns.
Well, he just clarified it. Wait. Take your AR-14s.
Okay, this is not okay.
Hold on. Hey, let's get moving. There's a lot of guys wanting.
I'm not worried.
Thanks so much.
Give me a break. Don't be such a worried guy.
Hey, there's a lot of
Look, here's the deal. Here's the deal. Are you able to own a machine gun?
I own a machine gun.
I said, are you able to own one? Under law.
Machine guns are illegal.
That's right. So AR-15's illegal.
How is that in a machine gun?
No, it's not.
Semi-automatic.
Yeah, do you need 100 rounds? Do you need 100 rounds?
In America. handguns than there are what you call assault rifles. Why are you advocating for assault rifles when people are buying for handguns?
That with the former vice president in Detroit earlier today, a moment that has gone viral on this day of 6 primaries and caucuses. A couple of tweets we want to share with you. Brett Baer of the Fox News pointing out that on CNN, former presidential candidate Andrew Yang has endorsed Joe Biden, who is now a CNN political analyst, made his endorsement on the cable news network's live primary night coverage. And there's this from Rick Klein of ABC News. Across the 12 pivot counties in Michigan, Obama-Trump counties, 9 are currently backing Biden. That's the same number Sanders won in 2016. And this is from Tim Alberta, who's now living back in Michigan. Of course, the writer of the book, The American Carnage. He writes for Politico. Forget about Macomb County. It's not the bellwether anymore. Look at Livingston, wealthy, well-educated, suburban, at the heart of the great realignment in the 2016 D primary. 17,500 votes cast tonight, 27,500 votes cast in 2016, a 50% turnout spike in Slotkin County. So looking at some of the key counties in Michigan to keep an eye on. That from Tim Alberta. And John Harwood of CNN saying, turns out the biggest challenge to the Democratic Party from 2016 to 2020 is that Donald Trump has been president for 4 years. Suzanne is next from Afton, Virginia. Good evening.
Yeah. Hi. Yes, I'm a Bernie supporter, and I'm a retiree, and I have to agree with your earlier caller that Biden is probably the worst candidate that could possibly go up against Donald Trump. In all the polls, Bernie Sanders beats Trump, Biden loses. Biden is the Wall Street corporate Democrat, and the corporate Democrats are all consolidating behind him. He's been behind cuts to Medicare and Social Security. He's for endless wars. He's for all the things that people should be voting against. And instead, somehow the corporate Dems have controlled the media and flipped everybody towards him. And Bernie's the only one standing up for the working people. So it breaks my heart because they're handing the election to Donald Trump again. And 4 more years of Donald Trump is going to destroy this country. But they're handing it to him because Biden's the worst candidate they could have picked.
Suzanne, if it is Joe Biden versus Donald Trump, how do you vote in the general election?
I will probably write in Bernie Sanders because I cannot vote for. They're 2 sides of the same dirty coin. They're both Wall Street shills, and they're both going to hand out more handouts to the wealthy. Look at the cuts they're trying to. I mean, the donations they're trying to give to the businesses that are hurting now with the virus. But they're both 2 sides of the same dirty coin. They're both the military-industrial complex and the Wall Street control, and screw the people, you know. So I can't bring myself to vote for either one of them because they're destroying this country.
Suzanne from Afton, Virginia, a state that Joe Biden won on Super Tuesday. Again, a look at the results from the primaries this evening, beginning with Michigan. It was called shortly after the polls closed at 9 o'clock this evening, East Coast time, with Joe Biden at 53%, 40% for Senator Bernie Sanders, and nearly half of the vote now in. Moving on to Missouri, another state that Joe Biden has won tonight by 58.5%, compared to 34% for Senator Bernie Sanders, a significant win in Missouri for Joe Biden. And then the numbers from Mississippi showing that the former vice president, well over 80% of the vote in Mississippi. Senator Sanders holding on to that 15% mark. Again, we mentioned that's important if he wants to get any of the 36 delegates that will be allocated from Mississippi. You need 1,991 delegates to get the nomination on the first ballot when the Democrats meet in Milwaukee for the Democratic Convention. Lori is up next from Omaha, Nebraska. Good evening.
Hi. Oh, hello, Steve.
Hello, Lori.
First, I wanted to thank that Navy veteran for his service. I think you guys should always thank the veterans for your service. You never seem to do that, ever.
Oh, I think we do. But go ahead.
Well, I never hear you do that, but, you know, and I watch every morning, so maybe I'll be paying special attention to you from now on.
Thank you, Lori.
Okay,
we love our veterans. We have a few in our family, so we appreciate it.
Oh, and I have them in mine, too. We love them.
Absolutely.
Okay, first off, with Bernie, you know, Bernie, he's not a good candidate. I can't believe how these people all just love him so much. He surrounds himself with people like, Linda Saussure and, you know, Omar and Tlaib. And It just seems like he kind of talks all the stuff, but he never says how he's going to pay for anything. And I really believe he took a dive in the last election to Hillary, and I think he'll probably take it this time. He gets a check writ to him for getting out, and he don't seem like he's fighting Joe too hard. And as for Joe, I just wonder about Joe. I'd like to know what kind of medications he's on, because, there's like these anti-dementia, or these dementia like Aricept and some of those. It'd be interesting to know what kind of medications Joe's on, because he doesn't seem like, it's not really normal what the things he says all the time. And he kind of gets kind of rude to people. I can't see why people want to even support him. As for me, I'm a third-generation, 42-year Democrat, and I voted for Trump, and I'll vote for him again. I think that he's doing a good job. And the coronavirus, it just seems like everything, the coronavirus, the Ukraine, the Stormy Daniels, it's just everything. I've never seen nothing like this in my 42 years. But, I love C-SPAN. I like watching you guys. Sometimes I think you're kind of biased on the calls you take. Every morning, you know what I do? I write down how many of each call you take just to see if it's fair. And it never works out that way. And it seems like you guys are kind of the judge, jury, and executioner. You take the calls you want to take, and then you cut off the ones that, that if you don't agree with them, because I do believe, Steve, that you're probably liberal. I know you never, you don't say that, but I think that. But tell the Bernie people they should, maybe they should come on the Trump train, and Bernie's going to take a dive just like he did before. That man, all he's after is the dollars, and it's really kind of sad how he leads the young people and the people like that to believe him. And Joe, oh, God, Joe Biden, his time came and gone a long time ago. So, but compare the ages. I mean, really, Trump 73 years old. I've never seen a man 73 have so much energy and to go like he does nonstop like that. People, I just can't understand when they call him a racist. What's he ever said? I never hear nothing.
Hey, Lori.
I'd say maybe Bernie.
Great. Thank you for the call. We're going to move on, but we appreciate the call from Omaha, Nebraska. Again, the polls closed at 8 o'clock Eastern time in Michigan, Missouri, and Mississippi, although some polling places stayed open until 9 o'clock in parts of Michigan. And the polls will be closing out west as well, where the voting is taking place in Idaho. Also, a caucus taking place in North Dakota, and the mail-in ballots in the state of Washington. Next is Dave from Oakland, New Jersey. Go ahead, please.
Hey, Steve. Hey, man, you're not liberal, are you, man? I think you're as objective as they come, like everybody else there at C-SPAN.
We thank you for that.
Anyway, I'm going to say this. Joe Biden and Sanders, do these guys have driver's license? Do they drive? I'm just curious, but I think it's time for them to take their money, and Joe can go back to Scranton, and we could set up the Vice Presidential Library right next to Houdini's museum there down on the main drag. And I think Sanders ought to go up there and stay in Vermont and get on his rocking chair and just look at everything else, because I don't think any one of these guys are going to have a majority of the delegates when they go to the convention.
Dave, thanks for the call. Let's go next to Greg, who's joining us from Jennings, Louisiana, supporter of Senator Bernie Sanders. Good evening, Greg.
Yeah, I'm just want to say I think the party's going to go over a cliff with Biden, because I'm coming up on 60. They think everybody who wants to vote for Sanders is young. But if Biden don't take some the progressive, maybe not just Bernie's issues, but progressive issues. I got hurt on the job, back surgeries, all kinds of other stuff, cancer, diabetes. I'm coming up on 60. My daddy was a World War II vet. Everybody in the family's a vet. But some kind of way, we are all takers. Republicans, want to say we are takers. I don't know what the deal is, and I've been a lifelong Democrat, been in the Democrat Party. I registered at 17, voted 18 on, never missed a vote. But I don't know what the deal is about how come they don't want to move forward and all this stuff about, if they want to vote for a criminal, then Trump's your man.
Great, thanks for the call. Dave Weigel of the Washington Post did this tweet saying tonight may be worse for the electoral left than Super Tuesday was. Michigan playing an enormous role in Sanders' electoral theory that there was a big Rust Belt electorate ready for his ideas. Opponents will now argue that the 2016 win was a low turnout fluke. Next is John joining us from Lake George, New York. Good evening, John.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, how are we doing today?
Good, John. Go ahead, please.
I just want to talk about with Donald Trump. I mean, everyone says they can't stand him, and then you got these Bernie Sanders guys saying, this is the worst 4 years. I mean, our economy has been great. You know, it's the best it's ever won. Unemployment rate is the lowest it's ever been. So I don't know what the big deal is with all these crybabies out here. What do you think?
John, thanks for the call from Lake George, New York. Zach Montalero is covering politics for Politico. He is joining us from their headquarters in Roslyn, Virginia. Thanks very much for spending this evening with us.
Thanks for having me.
So at first blush, what's the headline? What's the story coming out of tonight?
Ooh, well, right now it's a little too early. I want to say Washington, but Joe Biden is on pace for another great night. He won Michigan, a state Senator Sanders carried in 2016. He's going to crush in Mississippi. He won Missouri, one of the closest states in the country in 2016. So it's another great night for Joe Biden, basically.
And where does this put the Sanders campaign with an eye on next week, a key primary in Ohio and also Florida on Tuesday, although schedules now in flux because of the coronavirus, including what we saw tonight in Cleveland?
Yeah, you know, I think this puts first and foremost, it puts the debate on Sunday as a really, really major turning point for this election, or it could be a turning point should Sanders should Sanders want to turn this around, that he needs to change something, obviously. You know, Biden is not just winning in the South. Biden won up north, you know, on Super Tuesday. He's won Michigan, a Rust Belt state. He's crushing in the South. So this debate coming on Sunday will be a big moment for Sanders to try to turn his campaign around. And then next week, a lot of those states are friendly to Biden. Florida especially. You know, Florida looks to be a good state for Biden by all accounts. So, you know, what comes next for Sanders, really? That's really the next big question.
And we should point out that CNN debate that is scheduled for Sunday evening in Phoenix, Arizona, no audience because of the coronavirus issue. They're going to do it without an audience, and only two candidates, Tulsi Gabbard, who is not polling at all, only in the very, very low single digits, getting really maybe 1% of the vote, will not be participating in that debate. But what is the argument moving forward for the Sanders campaign after what appears to be tonight to be a sweep by the former vice president, at least in the states that have finished their polling tonight?
Yeah, well, it certainly ain't over yet. You know, it ain't over till it's over, basically. And Sanders says that, you know, his campaign says it's not over. We're still in this fight, and wait for those states to come in. You know, California still has not been entirely counted yet. The delegate lead that Biden has right now, it'll be big, it'll be sizable. But with California out, you know, Sanders is still hoping for a good performance in Washington, which we may not get tonight. That he's arguing that it's not as big of a lead as it seems that it is. I'm still in this race. My ideas are still broadly popular. In the exit polling we've seen across just about every state, a majority of voters say that they approve of Medicare for all versus disapprove. You know, it's a binary choice in these polls: approve, disapprove, not really given the option for a third option, say something like a public option. So it's, you know, not perfect. But Sanders can argue that with some validity to it, that my ideas are popular, I'm popular, this isn't over yet.
But as you look at this race, Zach Montalero, just so much has changed in the last 10 days. It seems a long time ago, but North Carolina or South Carolina was only a week and a half ago, and then Super Tuesday, and here we are tonight.
Yeah, it's really crazy that it was only 10 days ago. You know, this race has been going on for less than a month, and Biden was left for dead after Iowa and New Hampshire. You know, he was dead in a ditch. Everyone was writing him off. It was over, and his campaign was saying it's not over, it's not over, it's not over. Turns out they were right. The big difference between what we saw with Biden saying it's way too early, and now potentially for Sanders, is that a lot more states have voted. You know, between the first two early states, Iowa and New Hampshire, basically no delegates were awarded. Functionally, I think it was 2%, 2.5%. So nothing that's really out there that will really decide the nomination one way or the other. That's not the case anymore. Super Tuesday, last Tuesday, is the single biggest day on the calendar. Got another, I think, 500 delegates awarded. No, I think 250 delegates awarded today. So a significant amount of delegates have now been awarded and handed out. So it's not just a fluke first or second state. It's now Biden has performed strongly across the board, basically.
And as you look at the calendar ahead, as we mentioned, some campaign events have been scrubbed because of the coronavirus issue. where does that put the campaigns?
It's interesting. We're still in the early days and we don't really know how they're going to handle it. They both canceled events tonight that was supposed to take place in Ohio. I believe Biden canceled an event tomorrow as well, but they're now saying we're going to take it day by day, basically, and event by event in consultation with public health officials. That's what the campaigns are saying, and it's still early. Capitol Hill is still open, mind you. A lot of public institutions still open. The government has not closed. The government has not sent home employees, at least not broadly, but we could reach a point that campaigns have fundamentally changed because they have to become, instead of a hand-to-hand knock on your door kind of contact, it's texting, it's digital town halls, it's things like that. And I'm not sure how campaigns are prepared for that yet, just because it's an unprecedented situation. We've never had to deal with this before, that campaigns basically have to scrap their field operation more or less and scrap their live events and handle it from the comfort of a headquarters. And we don't really know who that's going to benefit and how they're going to plan for this quite yet.
But from your standpoint, does this, in essence, crystallize where the voters are tonight as they look at the administration's handling of this issue? We're going to get a speech on Thursday in Wilmington, Delaware, with the former vice president. It is being billed as a major policy speech on the coronavirus. We, of course, will be covering it for the C-SPAN networks as part of our Campaign 2020 coverage. But where does this put the former vice president and Senator Bernie Sanders on this issue?
Yeah, I haven't really seen too much polling yet on who they trust more, but that's going to be a major focal point for both of them going forward. That looks, this guy in the White House, Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, if you ask the Democrats, is not prepared to handle the coronavirus, and they will kind of hammer that point away in any speeches they give or any remarks or things like that. That's what we're really going to see going forward. It's just such a unprecedented situation, certainly in my lifetime and many voters' lifetimes, about having to drastically change, the potential American landscape, that it won't just be campaigns off the trail. It could be people home from work for a long period of time. It could be schools closing. We're seeing a lot of universities close. Harvard, canceling classes. Some local universities in D.C. have canceled classes. And we just don't really know what America is going to look like in 2 or 3 weeks. I'm not predicting, and I'm not a public health expert, I'm not predicting like a mass chaos or panic, but certainly the fabric of American society will at least be different, or at least change. We don't know how campaigns are going to respond to that. The mechanics of campaigning is a very impersonal, person-to-person kind of deal, or at least in-rally kind of deal, and that's just going to be different going forward.
We're talking with Zach Montellaro, who is joining us from the political headquarters in Roslyn, Virginia. He covers campaigns for the website and publication. Our phone lines are open. We'll get to your calls in just a moment, but first let's go through the numbers, the results, with 6 primaries and caucuses on what some are calling Super Tuesday 2.0. In Michigan, former Vice President Joe Biden, shortly after the polls were officially closed, was declared the winner, now with about half of the vote in, 53.2% for the former Vice President, 39.6% for Senator Bernie Sanders. That's in Michigan. Also primaries today in Missouri, another win for the former Vice President, approaching nearly 60% of the vote, compared to 33.9% for Senator Sanders, half of the vote now being reported in Missouri. And in Mississippi, a significant win with Joe Biden getting the lion's share of the delegates in that southern state. Over 80% of the vote for Joe Biden. Senator Sanders now eking out at 15.4%. Again, if he holds that margin, he will get at least a handful of delegates in Mississippi. So as you look at those numbers and see those numbers, Zach Montellaro, what's your reaction?
Yeah, again, it's early, but the big thing for me is the takeaway is Missouri. Missouri was one of the closest states in 2016. I think Hillary Clinton beat out Bernie Sanders by less than 2,000 votes. It was not a lot. And the fact that, the race was called early and Biden has a commanding lead in that state says a lot. It says a lot how the electorate is shifting too. Different Democrats are showing up. And it says something about Joe Biden's strength among black voters. That has been, his singular advantage so far. Biden's winning a lot of different types of voters, but black voters have really elevated Joe Biden's campaign. They stuck with him. They're powering his commanding leads in the South and in states like Michigan and Missouri and across the country. They're like his cornerstone. They're really kind of pushing him forward.
And it's fascinating as you look at this and you look back at 2016, where Hillary Clinton losing Michigan in 2016 narrowly to Senator Bernie Sanders, but then not campaigning in the general election. You just have to wonder why.
Right. Michigan will remain a real pain point for Democrats probably for a lifetime because of 2016. I don't think they're going to make that mistake now. Certainly, Biden and Sanders will have to finish out the primary before they return to Michigan. But I think you can expect to see a lot of Democrats in Michigan for the entirety of 2020. They're not really going to let up there. The interesting thing with Michigan is we see two major outside groups, American Bridge and Priorities USA, the two very prominent super PACs of the Democratic coalition, saying, we think this race is over. We've pledged to stay neutral in the primary, but Joe Biden is going to be our nominee. We're going to go up in the air in Michigan. That's meaningful. That Democrats are going to have advertising in Michigan. They're going to have some field work in Michigan. Michigan is going to be, one of the key states. Michigan, Pennsylvania will be another one too, where Democrats really pour in a lot of resources, and they're going to start doing it now too. They don't want to be caught flat-footed like they were in 2016.
We're going to take some calls from our viewers and listeners. We welcome our audience on C-SPAN Radio. Sweetie is on the phone from Gunnison, Colorado. What's on your mind tonight?
Well, hi there. I'm from Durango, Colorado, and I'm a Joe Biden supporter. I've been a lifelong Democrat, and I believe that Joe has the leadership experience to be president, that he's a moderate Democrat, but he's got fire in his belly. And I know that my moderate Republican friends will vote for Joe over Sanders. And to me, Joe has always been a friend to the working people all during his career. So I'm a supporter of Joe Biden, and I don't understand Democrats that vote for Donald Trump. It's been a disaster in the West with Trump's policies on clean air, the environment, our public lands being assaulted. So I know that Joe Biden will stand up for the values of all of us in the United States.
Thank you for the call. Let's hear from Pandora, a supporter of Senator Bernie Sanders, calling from Georgia. Good evening.
Hello. I've been on hold for about 30 minutes, and I have to get up at 5:30 and teach in the morning.
Thank you for waiting. What's on your mind?
However, Bernie Sanders is the only one without all the billionaires in his pocket who are pushing for Biden. It's so fascinating. The same thing happened 4 years ago when he should have won the primary that time. They threw all their weight behind Hillary. But it's the billionaires that own the media that are doing this, and it's really sad. I heard on NPR this afternoon they were interviewing a Frenchman and a Dutchman from Europe, and no one's worried about the cost of the coronavirus because they have socialized medicine, which works brilliantly. My ex is Swedish, and the socialized education and medicine work brilliantly. Unfortunately, the billionaires have to pay more tax, and that's really the problem in our whole process. And I can tell you, if this happens again, whether it's Trump weaseling, buying his way in, or Biden, I'll leave the country. I'm done.
Thank you for the call. Thank you for waiting on the line. And Zach Montellaro, you're hearing two different calls from two different Democrats. Your reaction?
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing is do the supporters of the candidate who doesn't ultimately win the nomination come out and vote? By and large, most Sanders supporters will come out and vote for Joe Biden and vice versa. Most Joe Biden supporters would vote for Bernie Sanders. We saw that in 2016, where despite the kind of contentious primary, the vast majority of Bernie Sanders supporters supported Hillary Clinton in the general election. But it's that couple of percent of people that won't turn out that, would be the point of concern for Democrats. I think it was the early exit polls in Michigan today had something like 88% of Democrats said they would ultimately support the nominee. And that's kind of a broad question. It doesn't ask who you're supporting. It doesn't ask, if Sanders or Biden. And so 88 is good. It's turning out that other 12% that really, really matters. Is how do you reach that 12% of voters? How do you make sure supporters of the other person turn out? In 2016, we saw this a lot. I don't think Bernie Sanders gets enough credit for what he did in 2016. It took him a while to endorse Hillary Clinton. He ran all the way to convention, but then he campaigned quite hardly for Hillary Clinton in the general election. We're kind of seeing that now with the coalescing of Democrats. Most of the Democrats who have backed Joe Biden so far who ran in this race were toward the moderate side, but people like Andrew Yang, of all people, just endorsed Joe Biden tonight on CNN. Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, all these candidates are getting behind Joe Biden to send the message that whoever the nominee is, we need to go out and we need to support them. So that's what you need to watch for, is that there will be people who don't turn out, but the vast majority of voters, regardless of who they support in the primary, will turn out for the Democratic nominee.
And what about Senator Elizabeth Warren?
Yeah, she's the interesting person right now. She hasn't endorsed anyone in this race. Not clear if she will even. But again, her supporters will vote either way. Especially Warren supporters were seemingly, pretty solid Democratic voters. A lot of the remaining ones, as her campaign trailed off, were white college-educated voters. That's a coalition that's really shifted pretty hardly towards Democrats in the past, in the Trump era, basically. So those voters are going to turn out too. If even at this point it could make a difference in the primary, because toward the end, Warren did not have a massive base of support. She had a really solid, really supportive, really distinct core, but it was not a massive swing. There's no evidence right now that suggests that a Warren endorsement for Sanders would totally swing this race the other direction, or vice versa, that a Warren endorsement for Biden would really make this locked up more than it is already. So it's making sure that she gets on whatever ticket, or she gets behind whatever ticket, rather, that the Democrats ultimately put forward, and she probably will. She's a Democratic senator. There's no universe in which Elizabeth Warren does not endorse the general election nominee and doesn't campaign very hardly for whoever that person is.
Your colleague Tim Alberta, who wrote the book American Carnage, he's now back in his home state of Michigan following the race there, and points out on Twitter, it's almost like all those kids at Bernie's University of Michigan rally did not vote. That youth vote was a key component of Senator Sanders' constituency. What happened?
Yeah, it's tough. We've seen some dips in the early exit polling compared to 2016 to 2020, that youth voters just aren't turning out as much as they were in 2016. Without going too far into it, it could be some methodological shifts in the exit polling, but it's concerning. Senator Sanders said that his candidacy will turn out those young voters, and to win the nomination, to win states, that's what he needs to do. He is overwhelmingly supported by young voters. And they just haven't turned up the numbers that he wanted them to. The young voters in general do not vote at the same rate as middle-aged voters, and certainly older voters. That's a tried and true truism in politics, that young voters don't turn out. So even boosting that number a little bit would be beneficial for Sanders and beneficial for the Democrat in the general election. We just don't see signs yet that that's happening. In the 2018 midterms, young voters saw the biggest jump, and by young I mean 18 to 25, 25 to 31. Young millennial voters especially. A lot of them voted in the midterms, but when a lot of them came out to the polls, they were still not even approaching what the group of voters who turned out who were older. The baby boomers, they still vastly outnumbered millennials. So Democrats want to juice that turnout as much as they can come the general election, and Sanders wants to do that as much as he can in the primary, certainly. But right now, we're just not seeing evidence that they're showing up.
And I know you said it is early. Again, we're awaiting the results from North Dakota, also Idaho, and in Washington State, where the mail-in ballots have to be in by 11 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 o'clock local time. This is from Mark Barabak of the LA Times, one of the first to have this tone in a tweet. Another big night for Joe Biden, including a win in Michigan, and now calls for Bernie Sanders to stand aside to unify the party against President Trump. This is going to be one of the stories tonight and tomorrow.
Yeah, the question is, how long does Sanders remain in the race, and how ugly does this race turn? Again, it's not over for Senator Sanders. Biden has a pretty strong delegate lead right now. Sanders can still mathematically do it. Something needs to change, but he's not out of the race. But, there will be pressure on Senator Sanders as much as he will respond to pressure from the Democratic Party, which is probably not well and probably not much. But there will be some level of pressure applied to him to see if he can exit the race. Sanders, he went on TV, said, "I'm not a masochist. I'm not going to stay in this to the bitter end." And Sanders has long said he'll support the nominee. So he's acutely aware that, if it's out of his reach, that there's really nothing he's doing but damaging the general election candidate. But, I can't see Senator Sanders exiting this race, at least at the very earliest before Sunday. And I'm not predicting he's going to exit the race on Sunday, but that debate is really going to loom large. That CNN debate on Sunday is really going to loom large. Sanders needs to change something in this campaign. He needs to turn something around. He needs to somehow energize his supporters and starting to attract, people outside of his usual coalition. And anywhere that could possibly change is that debate stage.
But did his comments regarding Fidel Castro damage him in Florida, especially in South Florida?
I don't know, which is not a very fun answer. I wonder how many people truly saw those comments. Florida was a state that was never predisposed to back Senator Sanders anyway. Clinton won fairly handily in that state anyways. Joe Biden has a strong foothold there. Mike Bloomberg, just look at it this way, Mike Bloomberg went very hard in Florida before he exited the race because he thought he could be strong there. It's hard to chalk up any individual comment to knocking down a candidate, especially in a news cycle like this, that when South Carolina was 10 days ago, and it feels like a lifetime ago, it's hard that any one individual comment would really mean lasting, long-term damage on a campaign. But it certainly wouldn't help you in Florida either, I'll put it that way. Biden's team is pretty confident about Florida. We haven't really seen much public polling out of that state. We've seen one or two rare polls that had Biden with a pretty strong lead in the state, but it's still up in the air. But that being said, that is not the state Sanders is looking to launch his comeback in either way.
We're talking with Zach Montellaro. He's joining us from Rosslyn, Virginia, the headquarters of Politico. A reminder, the results are available on our website at cspan.org. You can also keep track of the delegate total. Right now, by our count, the former Vice President Joe Biden has about 713 delegates, and Senator Bernie Sanders has about 589. Of course, that number will change as the results come into the evening. And as Zach Montellaro pointed out, the results from California are still not finalized. He's going to stay with us for a couple more minutes. We are still awaiting the Joe Biden campaign with remarks by the former vice president. He is in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. Some of the ads now on the air in the upcoming primary states, including Ohio and Florida. Let's watch.
Super Tuesday. State after state after state called for Joe Biden. Bernie Sanders goes on the attack. PolitiFact has called the Sanders campaign's attacks false. Joe Biden has always been a strong supporter of Social Security. Biden will increase Social Security benefits and protect it for generations to come. Negative ads will only help Donald Trump. It's time we bring our party together.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
This is an extraordinary man with an extraordinary career in public service. He revitalized American manufacturing as the head of our middle-class task force. He led our efforts to combat gun violence. He fought to make college more affordable, championed landmark legislation to protect our women from violence. Joe's candid, honest counsel made me a better president and a better commander-in-chief. And all of this makes him the finest vice president we have ever seen. The best part is he's nowhere close to finished. Bernie is somebody who has the virtue of saying exactly what he believes, great authenticity, great passion, and is fearless. Bernie served on the Veterans Committee and got bills done. I think people are ready for a call to action. They want honest leadership who cares about them. They want somebody who's going to fight for them. And they will find it in Bernie. That's right, feel the burn.
I'm Bernie Sanders, and I approve this message.
When I argued that we should freeze federal spending, I meant Social Security as well. I meant Medicare and Medicaid. I meant veterans benefits. I meant every single solitary thing in the government. And I not only tried it once, I tried it twice, I tried it a third time, and I tried it a fourth time.
Well, we've got some bad news for them. We are not going to cut Social Security. We're going to expand benefits.
I'm Bernie Sanders, and I approve this message.
Ads now on the air in the upcoming primaries and caucuses, and they're certainly on the air across Michigan. Let's talk about the issue of Social Security and what we're hearing from the Sanders campaign taking aim at Joe Biden. What is this all about?
Yeah, so that's been a recent line of attack with the Sanders campaign to try to possibly chip away at Biden's just absolutely dominating, commanding, whatever word you want to use, lead among older voters. Arguing that Biden has advocated for some Social Security cuts. It's a messy argument. I'm not the expert on entitlements here, but their argument is somewhere along the lines that Biden kind of floated this when he was vice president, when, during negotiations with Republicans, and the exact wording behind it is confusing and different, but it really cuts to mainly electorally, at least. Let's talk about electorally, where I can stay in my wheelhouse. That Biden's, part of Biden's strong coalition is not just black voters, it's older voters as well, too, especially older black voters, but older voters in general overwhelmingly support Joe Biden. If Sanders wants to launch a comeback and chip away at his margins there, Sanders needs to do so among these coalitions that have just been overwhelmingly strong for Biden. Black voters, old voters, college-educated voters in the suburbs, stuff like that. So this kind of cut towards that. What we've seen so far has not been super successful. Sanders, or rather Biden, is still winning these voters by a pretty strong margin in all these states that have happened after these ads have started airing. But that's what we're seeing a lot too.
Normally on a night like this, we would be hearing from a lot of the candidates, a lot of speeches, but we are waiting for just one this evening. Former Vice President Joe Biden is at the Constitution Center in Philadelphia. Remarks scheduled for 9:30 Eastern Time. It is now 10:20, and so he is considerably behind schedule. Reed Epstein of the New York Times pointing this out. Bernie Sanders will not speak or appear in public to address tonight's results, according to his campaign. We could presume that he'll have something to say tomorrow. What do you think it will be?
I don't know. Well, I'll tell you what it probably won't be. It probably won't be I'm ending this campaign. Again, Sunday looms large. I'm not going to pretend to have a view into Senator Sanders' head, but this race is not over yet. Biden has a strong lead, a commanding lead. It's not over, though, especially with a debate on the horizon. So that I don't think it'd be something along those lines. But, it's difficult to judge what he's going to say because his surrogates have been kind of split, too. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, perhaps the most important surrogate Sanders has this election, both because she's incredibly popular, incredibly well-known, and she really revitalized and saved his campaign after he had a heart attack, told viewers of her Instagram Live tonight that this was a tough night electorally, and she's right. This was a tough night electorally. But we've seen some Sanders staffers tweeting that this fight's not over. We're going to keep going. So, the message you can give on a night like this is probably, this is a tough night, but we're still in. We're going to keep fighting. Sanders' campaign's going to have some thought ahead of them, certainly. But again, don't expect him to drop out, at least at this moment. We haven't seen any indication that he's considering it. I haven't talked to his senior staff or behind the scenes, but all public indications really show that Sanders is not going anywhere. This race is not over.
And the other story that, of course, we have been focusing on so much the last week and a half or so is the coronavirus. And news from the Washington Post that Britain's health minister has tested positive for the coronavirus, a tweet that came out just a moment ago. So if you could just talk a little bit about that part of the story.
Yeah, at least with the election, the coronavirus is just going to loom large over all of this. I am not a public health reporter, certainly not an infectious disease expert, but what all the experts have been saying is that this could get serious, and it could have a very wide sweeping effect on the American society at large. We've seen that with the stock market, certainly. Major conferences have been canceled. South by Southwest in Austin, that's going to really, really hurt Austin's economy. We've seen struggles with the tourism industry right now. And how campaigns respond to that is going to be interesting. I can't recall a time that a campaign had to respond in the moment to a crisis quite as large like this. I guess the exception is the 2008 financial crisis around then with the campaigns responding to that. It's not on that level yet, but campaigns will have to adapt their strategy. Both the mechanics of how they run an election, run a campaign, can't shake as many hands, can't kiss as many babies, so to speak, can't meet as many voters, and can't knock on as many doors, certainly, but also have to change their messaging that this is a major crisis that America has to face, and that's what candidates need to show, both the President Donald Trump and Sanders and Biden. They need to show how can they lead the country in this situation.
Let's go to Holland in Asheville, North Carolina, supporter of Senator Sanders. Go ahead, please.
Hey there. I just wanted to say this was my first time voting in an election ever. In every national poll that's been done, Bernie wins against Trump. As a young gay person, seeing Joe Biden for so long not support gay people and really only start when it became popular, but Bernie Sanders has been supporting the gay community since 1986. Bernie got arrested at a civil rights protest when Joe Biden started talking about how he didn't want his grandchildren to grow up in a racial jungle. Bernie has flown over the border to make sure that people could get their medications. And I feel like people have really only started supporting Joe Biden after all the other candidates dropped out. And everybody just had to get behind Joe Biden because nobody wants Bernie to win. And I don't know. I see so many older people voting for Joe Biden, and please don't make me and my peers choose between two such stark evils, is my message. I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you for the call. Let's go to Dan in Valley Village, California. Go ahead, please.
Hello, sir. How are you doing today?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Hey, I'm a pretty big Trump supporter, have been for a few years living in L.A. It's not a really popular thing, so I don't really say it because the left aren't as tolerant as they claim, but either way, Biden or Sanders in November, it'll be like watching Batman fight Joker or the Riddler. Still hope the billionaire wins. Thank you for your time. Bye-bye.
Dan, thank you. Again, Zach Montalero, as you hear from our callers across the country, your thoughts, your reaction, what are you hearing?
Yeah, it's interesting. Democrats, on the first call, Democratic candidates certainly have coalesced around Joe Biden, but it's meaningful that voters have as well, too. This is not some, conspiracy that the DNC is moving votes or something like that. Voters have also coalesced around Joe Biden. And some voters never left Joe Biden to begin with. Black voters in the South especially, that's really where the core of Biden's support and the strength has come from, has been his unwavering support among black voters in the South. I don't want to trivialize their support because some voters never left Joe Biden, and the majority of voters so far have cast their vote for Biden. That's really that's a story in and of itself. It's not a split field anymore, and voters are getting behind Biden. Normally, I would imagine viewers of this program of C-SPAN are more tuned in than your regular voter. That voters follow the cues of elites, but voters will also vote their heart, and a lot of voters have so far gone for Biden. That's not to minimize Sanders' support. Sanders still has a very sizable coalition, but voters, thus far this election have pretty overwhelmingly said, "I'm with Joe."
Why do you think this race shifted so quickly?
It was, I think, the context of what the race was. After South Carolina, it was pretty clear that none of the remaining candidates had a path. There was the two big moments, I think, right now was, Biden's blowout win in South Carolina, which chased Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar out of the race. It showed that neither Amy Klobuchar or Pete Buttigieg, trying to present themselves as the Biden alternative, had a path. And then the poor performance of Mike Bloomberg and Elizabeth Warren on Super Tuesday. At the end of the day, we're talking about voters, and I'm saying how majority of voters support Joe Biden. At the end of the day, that's not how this election is decided. It's not how the nomination process is decided. It's decided with delegates. Candidates need to get 1991 delegates on the first ballot, pledged delegates out of all of these states. That door closed for Buttigieg and Klobuchar after, when Biden started to surge back on South Carolina, that door closed. And Bloomberg and Warren basically were non-factors on Super Tuesday. So that's why their door closed there as well, too. Those are the two big pivot points that kind of narrowed this down to a two-person race. And then then voters rather can decide between one of two candidates who they like the best. We had this talk a while ago about a contested convention, but could there be a contested convention? This bubbles up every cycle, and for a moment it looks like we could have finally had one. It's not going to happen almost assuredly now. Someone's almost assuredly going to win a majority of pledged delegates with two candidates in the race. And that's because that field shrunk so dramatically, so quickly.
And CNN's Jake Tapper again confirming what we had also reported a while ago, that Senator Bernie Sanders will not be speaking tonight. He told officials that will not have any reaction to the results, but we do have some early numbers in North Dakota, so a bright spot for the Sanders campaign if these numbers hold true. Just a small percentage reporting in. It is a caucus in North Dakota. Senator Sanders hovering at around 40% of the vote compared to former Vice President Joe Biden at 26.2%. This is with 10% of the vote in the North Dakota Democratic caucus. Back to your phone calls. Corey in Weirton, West Virginia. Good evening.
Hello, my name's Corey. I'm from the 1st District, West Virginia, in the Northern Panhandle, about 40 minutes outside of Pittsburgh. Just calling. I called in on the Biden line because I couldn't get through on any other lines. Just give you a quick history. I was an independent voter for about 18 years, of which the 8 years I've seen the corrupt Obama-Biden administration with all their scandals throughout the 8 years with their $150 billion Iran deal, the Russian nuclear deal, the Ukraine corruption during the Trump 2016 elections, Joe Biden's son with the Ukraine oil energy Russia company he made millions of dollars with, as well as Nancy Pelosi's son, John Kerry's stepson, the Fast and Furious deal.
Corey, I'll leave it there. Let me pick up on the one point that he brought up, which is Hunter Biden. Where do things stand in terms of a congressional investigation into Hunter Biden being pushed by some Senate Republicans?
Yeah, you got to watch the Senate. I think the last I saw was Senator Mitt Romney saying that he would support, a limited investigation because it won't be made public. It remains to be seen how much this will play into it. I don't really know what that investigation will be about, when it will turn up. But that'll certainly be a point that the Trump campaign has shown already that they're willing to basically hammer away on the vice president's family. How much any of this breaks through in a news cycle that just is nonstop is an open question. I can't remember what I reported myself last week, so we'll see how much of this breaks through. But that's something to watch for, I suppose, out of Congress.
And Zach Montanaro, I know you have to get back to your day, I should say evening job with reporting for Politico. Two real quick questions. First of all, former President Barack Obama when do you think we'll see some sort of endorsement or appearance with whoever is the nominee? Yeah. Let me jump in. We can't hear Zach Montalero, who is joining us from Politico.com, but thank you very much for being with us, and we'll have to get that answer at another time. You can follow his work online at Politico.com. We'll go to Evelyn next in Cleveland, Ohio. Good evening, Evelyn.
Yes, hello, how are you?
We're sorry we lost the audio in that last part of the interview with Montalero, but go ahead with your comment.
Oh, that's okay. I have a couple, if you don't mind. I guess the most important one is I'm so happy to hear there's going to be at least one more debate. And I wanted to personally ask Joseph Biden if he would confront Bernie Sanders so once and for all he could differentiate between the Bernie Sanders brand of socialism and communism. What's the difference? And I'd like a real answer, not one of these, he usually has 3 subjects or 4 subjects that he answers every question with. It's always the same. Free Medicare, free college, all that. And I think it's great. The Constitution promises so much, but it doesn't promise that we're in heaven. And I'm a Christian, and I'm proud of it, and I pray for Joseph Biden to win, because I just think he is a kind person, and that's what I'm voting for. I'll never vote for someone who has no character and integrity and who lies, and that's Trump to a T.
Evelyn, we'll leave it there. Thank you for the call from Cleveland, Ohio, where both the Sanders and the Biden campaign scrubbing campaign appearances tonight at the request of Governor DeWine and others in Ohio. So the Biden campaign heading back to its headquarters in Philadelphia, not far from Wilmington, Delaware, where the Bidens reside. We will not be hearing from Senator Bernie Sanders, who is ahead right now in one of the 6 states with primaries or caucuses. In the North Dakota caucuses, Senator Sanders is ahead. Let's look at the results first in Michigan, where the race was called shortly after 9 o'clock Eastern time for former Vice President Joe Biden. Now with well over half of the vote in Michigan, Joe Biden 53%, Senator Sanders hovering at just below 40%. In Missouri, also a state where Joe Biden has won easily, about 59.3% of the vote compared to 34.5% for Senator Bernie Sanders, and 2/3 of the vote now being reported from Missouri. A big win in Mississippi for Joe Biden at 80%, 81% almost. Senator Sanders hovering at just over 15%. 36 delegates at stake in Mississippi. And in North Dakota, a Democratic caucus, Senator Sanders at about 40%, Joe Biden at 26.2%. Also, we're eyeing the results in Idaho and the mail-in ballots in Washington State. All of the results as they come in into the evening and through tomorrow morning, available on our website at cspan.org/campaign2020. Candy is joining us from Johns Island, South Carolina. Good evening.
Hello.
Candy with us? Good evening. Go ahead.
Yes. I'm a Bernie supporter. I supported him in 2016, and I was one of the ones, I don't know how many joined me, but I didn't participate when he didn't win. So I forfeited that. And, of course, my peers, they grilled me on it, and they're kind of holding my feet to the fire with this election. And I just noticed that everything that Bernie talks about, it's exactly what most people talk about at work, their needs. They talk about it in the beauty shops, in the barber shops. They talk about it on the streets. They talk about it everywhere. But I noticed that people become afraid, and the people that need the most believe the least. And I think what we're seeing here in the Democratic Party in particular is that there's not an alignment of what people want and what they believe. People are actually voting against their wants because they believe more that they can get a little bit, or they'll just keep it like it is rather than to take the chance to rock the boat, to create some awareness, to raise some consciousness. They are afraid to do that. And so I think that's what we're seeing. So we see the Bernie supporters, he creates a shift. People don't like that, but he's been very consistent. His voters are very educated, and we're not party specific. So we don't really, we care if Trump wins, but we care more about actually having a functional department that meets the needs of the people who need what they need to have to live the most.
Candy, thanks for the call. Political reporter David Catanese with this point. The next 6 primaries, all of which take place in March, will be held in states carried by Hillary Clinton in 2016, and polling indicates Sanders' hill looks even steeper than ever before. And among those states, Ohio and Florida. We had intended to travel to Florida for some campaign events if they still happen. Here's the voting on March 17th. Illinois and Arizona also casting ballots on Tuesday, St. Patrick's Day, a week from today. Connie in Tacoma, Washington, supporter of Joe Biden, as we wait for the former vice president, hoping he comes soon. He is well over an hour late. Good evening, Connie.
Hi. I have been a Biden supporter. I was a Hillary supporter before that. I am all for socialized medicine. I have no problem with that. I'm rather liberal in my domestic views. I'm kind of a hardliner on foreign policy and national defense and that kind of thing. To give you a little bit of my background, I was raised Republican. I always voted Republican until Bush Jr. Was running for re-election. And what happened with me is I found out that my only son, my only child, is gay. And I was faced with having to reconcile that with the Republicans coming out very strongly against my son's rights. And so my party really moved away from me. And I find Joe Biden to be a good middle of the road, very temperate person that will lead this country not in a real crazy way. I'm worried about pendulum swings. I see that Trump is kind of a pendulum swing after Obama. And I'd hate to see this country go back and forth like that.
So, Connie, what is this campaign all about, from your standpoint, between if it is Joe Biden and President Trump?
It is to restore stability and honor to that office, to make mindful decisions, to listen to science, to make movement, to move forward with combating climate change, to improve people's lives as far as health care, access to education. I think that's very important. We need to bring this country up. We need people who are educated. This country, we don't do very well that way. Especially, we don't have a lot of. We need more college degree people.
Connie, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you for the call from Tacoma, Washington. We saw a moment ago Anita Dunn walk by in the lower part of the screen, maybe an indication that the former vice president is about to speak. She was brought in just before the New Hampshire primary to really take over control of the Biden campaign after coming in 5th in New Hampshire and 4th in Iowa, and then a distant 2nd in Nevada before his big win, his blowout win really in South Carolina, and 10 out of 14 states last week on Super Tuesday. And a big win tonight, especially in the key state of Michigan, with 125 delegates at stake, a state that Bernie Sanders had won narrowly in 2016. But now Joe Biden at 53% of the vote, Senator Sanders below 40% with well over half of the vote in Michigan. And this from Zeke Milner of the Associated Press, 2020 primary takeaways, Joe Biden's nomination to lose, that from the AP Politics desk. We'll go to Gabby in Columbus, Ohio, supporter of Senator Bernie Sanders. Good evening. Thank you for waiting.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I do believe in Bernie Sanders. I just don't believe in Biden because he seems, I'm sorry, it's hard for me to speak. I'm very shy, and I felt I really had to speak for Sanders. It just feels like he's more consistent in his actions, and I believe in him and his honesty. Basically took my family to vote for him, my husband as well. Most of the time we vote for Republicans. We are considered moderate Republicans, but we still went out to vote for Sanders.
Gabby, thank you for the call and good luck to you. Dana is next, Newhall, California. Good evening.
Good evening. I would like to thank Connie and the caller before her for their really thoughtful calls. Thank you very much. And to my fellow Americans, thank you very much for making your voices heard. I may not agree with all of you, but I appreciate your investment in this country. I sympathize with voters who prefer Bernie Sanders over Biden, but Democrats need to unite behind whichever candidate gets the nomination. Otherwise, we have 4 more years of Trump nominating yes men to every aspect of government to support policies that increase the debt of this country, that separate migrant parents from their children, that make it harder for journalists to report on what's really going on in our government, and make it easier for politicians to have no accountability. There is so much at stake, and if you don't vote because you don't like the Democratic nominee, you are shooting yourself in the foot and being an obstacle to your own cause. If Joe Biden returns civility to the nation's highest office, the United States will suffer a fate far worse than not having Medicare for all, than not having free education, at least during this crucial time in our history. There is a time for everything, and I believe that now is not the time for innovation. Now is the time to get back on solid footing in this country. It is not the time for extended lamenting. It is the time to take action and at least put a man who has shown decency during his career in public service into the highest office in this country, which is more than Donald Trump can say. Biden is far from perfect, but he's decent, and he's more inclined to listen to the voices of average Americans than the current president, who has never known anything but excessive wealth and nepotism.
Dana, I'm going to stop you there. A lot of people want to get through, but appreciate the call. We'll go to Tom next in Oceanside, New York. Good evening. Try to keep your comments brief. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, how you doing? I'm an independent voter in Oceanside, Long Island, New York, and I can't understand C-SPAN or CNN or Fox. They never talk about the problem with Joe Biden with all these gaffes that he has. I think he has either, I don't know for sure, a dementia or Alzheimer's. One day he says one thing, the next day he denies it, like today on TV with these workers in Ohio. I think it was Ohio. So, no, in Michigan, I think it was. That he had, what do you call about the AR-15? He was calling it the AR-14. There's no such a gun as the AR-14. He was especially called the guy an asshole or something like that. So what kind of nice guy is he? He doesn't. So I don't know how these Democrats, I think they got nobody else to vote to this guy that can't even know what he's saying from one day to the next. Why does somebody talk about this thing?
Tom, thank you from Oceanside, New York, an issue that we have and will continue to address. Jonathan Martin of the New York Times pointing out that in Missouri, Bernie Sanders on track at the moment to carry only one county, Boone County in Missouri, home to Missouri, the school. So the population centers that have these colleges and universities not giving the senator the results that he wanted, especially in Michigan and Missouri, to carry the states. All the results available on our website at cspan.org/campaign2020. Ann in Hurleyville, New York. Good evening.
Hi, was that
You're on the air. Yep, go ahead.
Yep, okay. I just pulled the phone away from my ear for a second. I just thought it was interesting, all the candidates pulling together behind Joe at the last minute. It does seem to be, it's definitely an effort to get this over and done with, and unity is important. Everybody wants to feel good about unity, But what kind of unity are we talking about? We're talking about Democratic Party unity, which won't necessarily bring the populace together for the general election. I understand and I appreciate why Elizabeth Warren will not endorse at this time, especially she won't join the party, because the progressive policies still need to be addressed. And the efforts, the current party unity efforts, will not draw in the progressives, but may alienate them further unless they are drawn in.
And thanks for the call. Karen Tumulty of the Washington Post on Twitter, old enough to remember when smart people thought it was inevitable that Bernie Sanders would make it to the convention with a plurality of delegates. So are most newborns. Right now, Joe Biden is leading in the delegate count by about 150 delegates. He is at the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, scrubbing plans to give remarks in Cleveland, as is Bernie Sanders. Also canceled his remarks earlier tonight. And we expect to hear from the former vice president, but he is now an hour and 15 minutes late. He was scheduled to speak at 9:30 Eastern time. Daryl in Canyon Lake, Texas. Good evening.
No, it's Dale. It's Dale.
Dale,
but thank you.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you for letting me on. I mean, this is the first time I ever got on with you. I've been calling you for 3 years. Anyway, okay. People are so misinformed in this country. It's pathetic. Really. I mean, they just, I think they read everything off. They believe everything off of their phone, this, that, the other thing. People, study. The Democrat National Committee, I'm 72. First time I voted in 1964. Anyway, study. Don't believe what you see here in the news media. Don't believe what you see on your phone. Study, and you'll find out that the way this country's going right now is the way it's gone for 200 plus years.
Dale, thanks for the call. The former vice president does not have anything on his schedule tomorrow. According to his campaign, he will be meeting with advisors. He is staying in Wilmington, Delaware for a speech on Thursday. And here is the former vice president in Philadelphia. Live coverage on C-SPAN.
By the way, we weren't planning a rally, but our headquarters is just around the corner. And these are all people who are working like the devil to try to get us elected as the... So I want to thank my sister Valerie and my son-in-law, Dr. Howard Kreiner here. And folks, look, we were planning a big rally in Cleveland tonight. But the governor of Ohio asked the presidential campaigns to cancel their indoor public events in Cleveland with large crowds of people. And that's what we did due to the coronavirus, and he was concerned about that. And as I've said all along, that we would follow the guidance of the CDC, state and local officials, and public health officials with respect to our campaign events. And we'll continue to do that. This whole coronavirus issue is a matter of presidential leadership. And later this week, I'll be speaking to you on what I believe the nation should be doing to address this virus. But tonight, I want to speak to you from Philadelphia, where we announced our campaign at the front end, where we did our final announcement. To all those who have been knocked down, to all those who have been counted out, left behind, this is your campaign. Just over a week ago, many of the pundits declared that this candidacy was dead. Now we're very much alive. And although there's a way to go, it looks like we're going to have another good night. With victories in Mississippi, Missouri, Michigan, and we're waiting to hear from North Dakota, Idaho, and Washington State. As I said from the beginning, this election is the one that has character on the ballot. The character of the candidates, the character of the nation is on the ballot. It's more than a comeback. in my view, our campaign. It's a comeback for the soul of this nation. This campaign is taking off, and I believe we're going to do well from this point on. Take nothing for granted. Want to earn every single vote in every single state. But if you're willing, if you want to join us, go to joebiden.com. Sign up, volunteer, and contribute if you can. We need you, we want you, and there's a place in our campaign for each of you. And I want to thank Bernie Sanders and his supporters for their tireless energy and their passion. We share a common goal, and together we'll defeat Donald Trump. We'll defeat him together. We're going to bring this nation together. We're regenerating a Democratic base, the Democratic Party, the African American community, high school educated folks like the ones I grew up with in Claymont, not far from here. In my old neighborhood, labor, suburban women, veterans, firefighters, union members, and so many more. People of every economic station. The poor who are struggling, and they are struggling in this environment. The middle class who worries about whether or not they're going to be able to hang on and stay there, maintain their economic security. They're the reason Jill and I got involved in this campaign in the first place. And they're the reason why I became a Democrat so long ago. And I can't tell you, I really mean this from the bottom of my heart, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the confidence they've shown in me thus far and the way they turned out to vote for me. In my first campaign, when I was a kid, a long time ago, I had a billboard that said one thing on it. Had a picture of my wife and children, and it said, "For all our families." That's all it was, for all our families. That included Democratic families, families of independent voters, Republican families, everyone of every stripe, for all our families. And look, that's what we were able to accomplish in South Carolina. That's what we did on Super Tuesday. And it appears, although it's a little premature, it appears that's what we're able to do tonight. In just the past week, so many of my incredibly capable competitors have endorsed me. Mayor Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, Beto O'Rourke, Mike Bloomberg, Cory Booker, and Kamala Harris. Together we're bringing this party together. That's what we have to do. Tonight, we are a step closer to restoring decency, dignity, and honor to the White House. That's our ultimate goal. Yes. And at this moment, when there's so much fear in the country, and there's so much fear across the world, we need American leadership. We need presidential leadership that's honest, trusted, truthful, and steady. Reassuring leadership. If I'm given the honor of becoming your president, I promise you I'll strive to give the nation that very leadership. Every day, I have a privilege to hold office. That's the reason why I'm running for president. I believe we're in an incredible moment in American history, a phenomenal opportunity to deliver a bold, progressive vision to the American people, guaranteeing that every American has health care, affordable health care, total health care, not a privilege but a right. Building on Obamacare, providing every child access to good education, regardless of their zip code, to deal with the moral depravity of our children who have to learn as they go to school, little children, to duck and cover, zigzag down a hallway because they fear someone with a semi-automatic weapon may be coming in. We have to stand up to the gun manufacturers and to the NRA, and I will do it. We have to rebuild the middle class. We have to rebuild the middle class, and this time bring everybody along. Everybody along. And my fellow Americans, we have to once again lead the world. Donald Trump's America First policies made America alone. You know, in the fight against climate change, we have to rally the rest of the world to act, and act now. Rejoin the Paris Climate Accord on day one. Make it clear to our allies that we'll honor our commitments, that our word can be trusted. And make clear to our adversaries that we will stand fast in restoring world order. That's the American responsibility. Tonight, I'm speaking to you from the National Constitution Center, not far from where two of the most important documents in all of history were written. The Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Those words became the American creed, known around the world. The U.S. Constitution, we the people. These words literally changed the world. We've never fully lived up to the promise of either of those documents, but we've never, ever before walked away from them. And they're a reminder of what's at stake in this election. Our very democracy is at stake in this election. As I said from the moment I announced, not far from here, that I believe we're in the battle for the soul of this nation. With Donald Trump as president, our core values, our standing in the world, our very democracy, everything that has made America, America, is truly at stake. I believe this nation can overcome 4 years of Donald Trump, but given 4 more years, he'll forever and fundamentally change the very character of this nation. We can't let that happen. But winning means uniting America, not sowing more division and anger. It means having a president who not only knows how to fight, but knows how to heal. It means replacing a president who demeans and demonizes people with a president who believes in empathy, compassion, and respect for everyone. It is my hope that the days of divisiveness will soon be over. We're a decent, brave, resilient people. We are better than this moment we're in. And we just need to remember who we are. This is the United States of America. There's not a single thing we cannot do if we do it together. We're on close to the eve of St. Patrick's Day. I'm thought of a quote some of you heard me quote many times. A fellow that I admired very much who passed away not long ago, a poet named Seamus Heaney. He wrote a poem called The Cure of Joy. And here's what he said in one stanza. He said, "History teaches us not to hope on this side of the grave, but then, once in a lifetime, that longed-for tidal wave of justice rises up, and hope and history rhymes." I truly believe it's within our power, for the first time in a long time because of what's happened in the past 3 years, the power to make hope and history rhyme. That's what we're going to do. God bless you all, and may God protect our country.
From the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, and remarks tonight by the former Vice President Joe Biden, remarks that were initially scheduled to take place in Cleveland, Ohio, but as you heard, they were scrubbed at the request of Ohio state officials. Also, the Bernie Sanders campaign scrubbing plans to give remarks in Cleveland, and we will not hear from Senator Sanders. He is back in Burlington, Vermont. Let's go through the numbers. 6 states with primaries or caucuses, and so far the former vice president is ahead in most of them. We'll begin with Michigan, where the 64% of the vote is now in. Joe Biden at 53.7% of the vote, compared to Senator Bernie Sanders at 38.1. 125 delegates at stake in Michigan, 352 delegates total in the 6 states with primaries and caucuses. In Missouri, an easy win for Joe Biden, now hovering over 60% of the vote, with nearly 93% in from Missouri. Senator Bernie Sanders, who had hoped to do well in that state, with only 34.4% of the vote. In Mississippi, an essential blowout for the Biden campaign, getting over 80% of the vote in Mississippi, compared to 15.1% for Senator Bernie Sanders. If he hovers at that 15%, he will get a handful of the 36 delegates in Mississippi. One bright spot for the Sanders campaign, with 10% of the vote now in the North Dakota Democratic caucuses. Senator Sanders at nearly 40%, former Vice President Joe Biden at 26.2%. It is now just past 11 o'clock here in the East, and the polls are now closed in Idaho and the mail-in ballots in Washington State. Here are some of the Biden supporters with cheers, the campaign workers. The Biden campaign is based in Philadelphia. A reminder that all of the results are available on our website at cspan.org/campaign2020. You can also keep track of the delegate totals, all of our campaign events dating back to the earliest announcements and speeches and town hall meetings, our interviews and other programs related to Campaign 2020 at cspan.org/campaign2020. And a reminder, C-SPAN's Washington Journal tomorrow morning will have the results from the primaries and caucuses and your phone calls. The Washington Journal every day at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 4 o'clock for those of you on the West Coast, and heard on C-SPAN Radio coast to coast on Sirius XM and on the web at cspan.org.
During this election season, the candidates beyond the talking points are only revealed over time. But since you can't be everywhere, there's C-SPAN. Our Campaign 2020 programming differs from all other political coverage for one simple reason: it's C-SPAN. We've brought you your unfiltered view of government every day since 1979. And this year, we're bringing you an unfiltered view of the people seeking to steer that government this November. In other words, your future. So this election season, go deep, direct, and unfiltered. See the biggest picture for yourself and make up your own mind. With C-SPAN's Campaign 2020, brought to you as a public service by your television provider.
Vice President Pence gave an update on the coronavirus with members of the White House task force. They talked about increased testing, the level of risk for most Americans, and actions the government might take to ease any financial burdens caused by the outbreak.
Great. Good afternoon. We just completed today's meeting of the White House Coronavirus Task Force, and I couldn't be more proud of the efforts of the men and women standing behind me, or all of those standing behind them. President Trump said from early on that this would be a whole-of-government approach, and today gives evidence of the fact that it is also a whole-of-America approach. We're bringing the full resources to the federal government and the full resources of this great economy and our great business sector to bear in protecting the American people and protecting American families. A few updates from today. As we continue to expand testing availability across the country, testing is now available at all state labs. By the end of this week, there will be more than 4 million more tests made available in jurisdictions around the country. 1 million are already in place. Thanks to the good work of our top commercial labs that the President Trump brought together yesterday, LabCorp and Quest are in the process now of distributing and marketing coronavirus tests all across America. And we're working with state and local officials to ensure that that happens as rapidly as possible. But as the testing is expanding, we wanted to make sure the American people knew that testing was available to them and that cost would not be a barrier. Today, President Trump assembled the top health insurance executives in America. And as we announced earlier today, all of our major health insurance companies have now joined with Medicare and Medicaid and agreed to waive all co-pays, cover the cost of all treatment for those who contract the coronavirus. They've committed to no surprise billing, and they've committed to encourage telemedicine. It was a year ago that Medicaid actually expanded to pay for telemedicine. Medicare pays for telemedicine. So now for seniors who may think that they are either at risk or have contracted the disease, they can get medical advice without having to go to the doctor or go to an emergency room. I know I speak for President Trump when I say how grateful we are to see our health insurance industry step forward to meet this need so that no American should be concerned about being able to pay for or afford the cost of a coronavirus test if they deem and their doctor deems it to be appropriate and necessary. The President also went to Capitol Hill today to meet with members of the United States Senate Republican caucus. There he talked about an economic package, including he's calling for payroll tax relief. And I think most important to the President's heart, we want to make sure that hourly workers, hardworking blue-collar Americans that may not have paid family leave today, that small and medium-sized businesses in America would be afforded the resources to provide paid leave so that no one would feel that they have to go to work if they might be infected or if they might have been exposed to the coronavirus. We had a good reception on Capitol Hill. Our legislative teams have fanned out. We're going to be working with Republican and Democrat leadership to move an economic package. Larry Kudlow will be reflecting on that in just a few moments. We also talked about what are known as N95 masks, and we're working, Senator Deb Fischer and others have important legislation that would extend temporary liability protections so that masks that are made for industrial use could be sold to hospitals to ensure that our healthcare workers are properly protected and outfitted. We're grateful for growing bipartisan support for that measure, and we're going to be working earnestly with Republicans and Democrats to move a reform that would make more N95 masks available. I'm also pleased to report that we did receive this afternoon a comprehensive proposal from the cruise line industry, a proposal that includes advanced screening, improving medical services on ships, providing for airlift evacuation and land-based care at the expense of the cruise lines for anyone that might be not only infected with the coronavirus, but with any serious illness. We'll be reviewing that in the next 24 hours. The President's objective is for us to make cruise lines safer, even as we work with the cruise lines to ensure that no one in our particularly vulnerable population is going out on a cruise in the near future. I'm going to recognize Dr. Fauci to talk about where we are. Dr. Birx will give us some research that she's done on the scope. We'll have other updates. But let me say once again, this is a whole-of-government approach. And from early on, President Trump has insisted that our government at the federal level, all of our partners at the state level, work in concert to protect the American people. And as we stand here today, the risk to the average American of contracting the coronavirus remains low. But we're absolutely determined to give every American the tools and the information that they need to protect themselves, their families, their workplace, their schools. And we're going to work together. We're going to work together to see our way through this, and working with leaders in both parties in Congress, working with leaders at the state level all across this nation. I'm confident we will. With that, Dr. Tony Fauci for an update on the status.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Just to give you a very brief sketch of what we do every day, the cases continue to increase globally. We're paying particular attention to the cases in Europe, in Italy, and France, in which we're starting to see that up at the same time as the relative number of new cases come down from China. What we're seeing in Europe is that Europe is in that upslope. So that's something that is expected. That's the way these kinds of outbreaks go. This is not a surprise to anybody if you look at the history of infectious diseases outbreaks. In the United States, we continue to have new cases. As of this morning, there were 712, I believe, with 27 deaths. Guaranteed by the time of this evening, that's going to be up, and there'll be several more. And tomorrow, there'll be several more. So we realize that this is something, obviously, that we've been saying all along, that we're taking very seriously. Now the question is, what are we going to do about that? And there are a number of things that one can do in order to blunt it. If you look at the curves of outbreaks, they go big peaks and they come down. What we need to do is flatten that down. That would have less people infected. That would ultimately have less deaths. You do that by trying to interfere with the natural flow of the outbreak. So what we're saying today is that although we keep coming in and saying appropriately that as a nation, the risk is relatively low, there are parts of the country right now that are having community spread in which the risk there is clearly a bit more than that. And you know the places, Washington State, California, New York, and Florida. But what I want to talk to you about today, just for a moment or two, is that we would like the country to realize that as a nation, we can't be doing the kinds of things we were doing a few months ago. That it doesn't matter if you're in a state that has no cases or one case. You have to start taking seriously what you can do now, that if and when the infections will come, and they will come, sorry to say, sad to say, they will. But when you're dealing with an infectious disease, we always have that metaphor that people talk about, that Wayne Gretzky, he doesn't go where the puck is, he's going where the puck is going to be. Well, we want to be where the infection is going to be, as well as where it is. So what we have here, if you could see that here, it's here is that if you go to coronavirus.gov, remember when Dr. Birx yesterday mentioned some of the things that we put together. These are really simple. Keeping the workplace safe, keeping the home safe, keeping the schools safe, and keeping commercial establishments safe. This should be universal for the country. Everyone should be doing that, whether you live in a zone that has community spread or not. When you have community spread, you're obviously going to ratchet up the kinds of mitigations that you have. But at a minimum, this is the minimum that we should be doing. Everybody should say, all hands on deck, this is what we need to do. So I'll stop there, and later I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Dr. Fauci.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, and thank you, Dr. Fauci, for that clarity. We continue to monitor the situation across the country and across the globe, and we are very fortunate between Dr. Fauci and I. We have long-term contacts out there in many of these countries that are experiencing current outbreaks. We continue to review all the scientific literature to look for insights and to really determine who's at the greatest risk. And that's why we've talked to you about people with immunodeficiencies at any age, people with medical conditions, and the elderly, and how important it is for all of us to take these precautions in the household to protect others. Because we have circulating flu and other respiratory diseases at this time. We all have to act like all of those diseases, any respiratory disease, can be transmitted to others. And as we said yesterday, we're hoping that decreases all the respiratory disease we're experiencing. Finally, we got new reports out of China who had 9 pregnant women during an acute COVID infection, and all 9 were infected. And they delivered while they were infected, and all 9 babies were healthy, and the mothers were healthy. So we continue to look for data like that to be reassuring to the American public, at the same time ensuring that every single person is participating in this response to this virus and taking those precautions that we should be taking every day. If we start doing this today, we will be ready next year for any of our respiratory diseases, because I think we'll be able to show that these simple household, simple work, simple school, simple business approaches across the country can change all of our respiratory diseases. So we thank you for getting the message out. We thank you for the participating and ensuring in your households and in households around America that we're protecting all of those who need our support right now.
Thank you, Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci. And this information is available at coronavirus.gov. And as we said, we can't say often enough, the risk of contracting the coronavirus to the average American remains low. But for senior citizens with serious underlying chronic health conditions, the potential for serious consequences is very real. And make no mistake about it, by practicing these habits in your home, in your school, in your business, you're not only protecting your health, but you're also protecting those that are most vulnerable. With that, for an update on the progress that President Trump made today with our health insurance companies, I'd like to recognize Seema Verma.
As the Vice President said, we had a terrific meeting with the insurance companies, a real example of a public-private partnership where they agreed to waive copays for testing, not do any surprise billing, and also cover the costs of the COVID virus-associated costs. The other things that they did is they asked the President for more flexibility in Medicare Advantage plans. And the President agreed to do that. And so today we issued guidance to our Medicare Advantage plans that not only can they waive the costs for the test, but they can also go further to removing prior authorization requirements. They can waive prescription refill limits. They can allow for mail delivery of prescription drugs and expand more access to telehealth services if they weren't offering that in their plan. Also at CMS, we continue to work with healthcare providers around infection control practices. We met with home health agencies and also hospitals, and today we issued guidance to dialysis facilities as well as home health agencies around infection control.
There's been a great deal of attention about the Grand Princess, and HHS, working with the Coast Guard, with the Department of Defense, is currently working through disembarking American passengers returning foreign nationals to their country, and I wanted to ask Secretary Azar to speak and update us on the progress.
Thank you. So with regard to the Grand Princess, I wanted to first express our appreciation to Governor Newsom, to the Mayor of Oakland, the people of Oakland, the longshoremen, the stevedores who've helped with bringing it in and clearing the dock area so that we can do all of our operations there. We've got Admiral Abel here with us today, who's been leading the Coast Guard efforts, and then Deputy Secretary Began from State has done incredible work with our foreign partners to help with the repatriation of their nationals who are on board the ship. As of our data that I've got is as of noon Pacific time today, so this will have increased quite substantially since my last update. But as of noon Pacific, we had 548 individuals who have been offloaded from the ship. 228 Canadians are already back in Canada, flown there I believe was overnight. 171 Californians were taken by the government of California and are now at Travis Air Base. 26 individuals were sick, and they are being treated for various. It could be from the novel coronavirus. It could also just be we had some frail individuals who are sick that needed treatment. Our goal is to get all of the citizens of California off today to be in the care of the California state government, as well as to get the UK citizens off today so that they could be repatriated to the United Kingdom. We continue to work with other countries on all of those maneuvers. We will have non-California residents who will be in transport to the bases at Dobbins and at Lackland. Today, we hope, or tonight. So everything is progressing. It seems to be progressing well. We're using the highest isolation, quarantine procedures, medical screenings possible to ensure the safety of not just the passengers, but also of the local communities and all of the healthcare workers and others, emergency responders who are helping. So thanks to all of our partners for their help with this very complex operation.
Yeah, well done. Good report. And let me echo the Secretary's appreciation to Governor Gavin Newsom, the state of California, the city of Oakland. It has literally been a seamless partnership. Everyone on that ship will be tested, isolated, and quarantined as appropriate and provided with treatment. The crew on the ship, other than those who were ill, will be quarantined on the ship offshore. But it really represented the kind of partnership and cooperation from every level of government that that every American I know is grateful to see. With that, on the economic front, Larry Kudlow.
Thank you, sir. Yesterday, in a meeting in the Oval, the president, acknowledging there are going to be challenges on the health and economic side, he mentioned that he intended to bring the full power of the federal government to deal with these challenges. And accordingly, as Vice President said, up at the Republican Senate luncheon today, and he mentioned it in this room yesterday, President Trump has unveiled his proposals, strong proposals, for a temporary payroll tax cut holiday, which I think he would prefer to last